It was a cold January 15th, 1920, when a telegram was rushed to Dr. Dunbar Rowland of Jackson, Mississippi, stating the following. Dear Doctor, one Newton Knight of war fame, and the leader of the Jones County deserters, is still living near Soso and just over in Jasper County. He is very old and has sent out word that he desires to have some person come with a stenographer and let him make a statement of the true conditions, etc., of those times because he has seen so many lies of the times. This old man is liable to die at any time, and the chance to get the information, men, facts, and events will be lost to the time if this statement is not obtained. I am writing to you to know if you can arrange to have this statement taken, as it is will to be a historical paper, as far as material is concerned, of the most valuable kind. I suggest that you get some persons he might know with a stereographer, as the old man will talk more freer. If you could arrange Judge Devours or W.S. Welch to go, it would be okay. I give you this information because I know you are interested in getting first-hand knowledge, and this is the first chance, and perhaps the last chance, that has come for us to get the true facts about Jones County during the war. Signed, your friend, S. Moreland. Now, this telegram is very important because this is nearing the end of the life of the famed, some might call him a hero, some might call him the devil, Captain Newton Knight. Regardless, he was the captain. And this is the last time they're actually going to have a chance to record and listen to his story, his side of things, and what his legacy will mean for the future. Little does he know that his life will be such an impactful event on Mississippi history that I don't think he could even fathom it. His relatives and his descendants, such as Davis Knight, would go on to make great strides in race relations for the state of Mississippi. And it all traces back to Newton Knight. So, today, we're going to be taking a look at the life of Newton Knight, his origins, his time of the war, and his race relations following the war, and how he transformed the Mississippi region. Not just Jones County, and it's not just the county, the area around it, but the Mississippi region in the South in general. And what his legacy means today. I'm Charlie King, and welcome to Mississippi History, the study of Newton Knight. Reading that telegram is always very interesting to just see how it is littered, completely littered, with grammatical errors and misspellings. It's incredible that they were able to send that out and be able to comprehend what they sent. It's remarkable. Anyway, that is one of the most important telegrams possibly sent to Jackson, Mississippi in 50 years since the Civil War. Because the end of the Civil War is dying with Newton Knight. And this would be the last chance they have to actually record the events and lectures that Newton Knight would like to give. Now, Newton Knight never really considered himself a Unionist. He never considered himself a diehard Unionist outright. He was very, very almost calculated in when he wants to be a Unionist. But for all intents and purposes, he's no Sherman, he's no Grant. He's not out there waving the American flag, marching with the Union Army to Atlanta, because there were Southerners like that. There were Southerners that would like to be a part of the Union Army and not be a part of this little rebellion group in Jones County. But Newton Knight never really stood there. He was never stood with the United States in that aspect, and he pleaded for their help, as we'll get into later, but he was never directly favoring a Union victory per se. He was favoring a victory for his county, his area, and his people. So he didn't really fit in with the context of the Union. And he didn't really fit in with the Confederacy either. We're about to get into that as well. But one of the most important things of information we have on Newton Knight is actually an excerpt from one of his relatives, a descendant who was around in the 1950s, who actually wrote The Echo of the Black Horn, which is kind of it's a very, very lost cause painted or a tale of Newton Knights, you have to look at it and take it with a grain of salt, absolutely. But it is still a very important piece because it is completely covered in facts as well. So, this being one of the facts, we're going to read a short little excerpt on this, and then we'll go in depth about what it means. Newton Knight was born 1837 and was the son of Albert Knight. Albert Knight was the son of John Knight. Newton Knight married Serena Turner, who was born in 1837 and was the daughter of John Turner and the sister of R. George Washington Turner. Sierra and Newton were 19 years old when they married. Now, this part of the story is not very much painted in the Lost Cause tradition. You'll see what I mean here in a minute when we get into the Lost Cause tradition at some of the wording she says, but it's important to look at the first area of when he's born and who he marries, because this marriage is going to be legitimate in the Bible records, I guess, but they're not going to be quite legitimate to each other. And this will certainly affect race relations in the future for Mississippi, which is an absolutely fascinating topic. But we'll break this down into different areas today. First, we're going to look at Newton Knight and where he's coming from before he gets involved in the rebellion. Then we're going to look at his rebellion stage. And then finally, we're going to look at the post-war scene for Newton Knight and how he affected race relations for the Mississippi region. And we're going to try to do this in about 10 minutes. So get ready. First things first, to understand who Newton Knight is, we have to understand where his family is from and what they are. They are by no means a rich Southern family. They're by no means even middle class at the time. They are absolutely dirt poor. Any type of, I guess, social merit they had faded with the sale of their last slave under Albert Knight. Years prior to Newton Knight's birth. It's interesting to look at where he's sitting at right now. Newton Knight's family has a lot of mixed blood already. Not only do they not fit in to the social economical values of a Confederate South in the future, they don't really fit into a Union view either. They have native blood. And the Union's greatest enemy for the early 19th century and mid-1830s, it's the Native American tribes. And they can't fit in there either because they're not pure white. And this will come back to haunt them for generations to come in the future. But I digress. We'll get to that in a bit. It's just important to note that going into 1861, going into the beginning of the war, after Mississippi's the second state to secede from the Union, Newton Knight isn't really part of this Confederacy socially. He absolutely is not part of it from a fiscal standpoint, but he's not about to defend the Union either. So as we look at Newton Knight and how he kind of changes over the course of the next 4 years during the war, it's important to remember where he came from, who he is, and how he fits in an American society that is steamrolling to the 20th century. With the secession of Mississippi following South Carolina's secession in 1861, Newton Knight got his marching orders, to join up with the Confederate Army, as all men in the state of Mississippi were required to, and he went off to fight in the war, and he was only there for a brief period before he had to return back home in the fall of 1861. For a dire matter, his father, Albert Knight, was actually passing away, so he had to go visit him on his deathbed. He wouldn't re-enlist again until May 13th, 1862, and he would be joined up with his friends this time in Company F of the 7th Battalion of the Mississippi Infantry. So he was making sure he would join up with his friends so that way they couldn't be separated in the case of an event of splitting battalions or whatnot. And when he went in, he only wanted to be a medic, and he made this fundamentally clear that he wasn't there to fight a war for the rich men. He wasn't there to fight for the Confederacy. His legitimate goal was only to be a field medic and help those in need. Now, at the same time, the Confederate Congress passed the notorious, and by notorious, it is one of the probably the worst political moves the Confederacy could have made at the time in regards to morale for fighting. They passed the infamous, and quote, this is going to be in a quote, the 20 Negro Law. And this law pretty much summarized if you had over 500 head of sheep or cattle, or you had 20 or more enslaved men or women, that you did not have to serve. And one of Newton Knight's friends, Jasper Collins, who ironically is related to another rebellion fighter, not in the Confederacy rebellion, but a rebellion towards the Confederacy in Texas. This infuriated him, and he said this was the last straw, and he threw his gun down and never returned to Confederacy. And it wouldn't be a few months until Newton Knight followed in his footsteps. In fact, we're going to return to Ethel Knight and her extraordinarily biased view of the Civil War and how Newton Knight came back home and what his reasoning for it was, officially or unofficially, as we read this. Newton Knight killed his brother-in-law because he found he was making love with Sierra while Newt was away in the Civil War. Newt then became an outlaw. The brother-in-law and his wife had moved in with Sierra while Newt was in the army. After Newt killed the man, he went AWOL as a deserter and formed a band of bandits. They killed and stole and ran from one hideout to another, hiding from the law for a number of years during the Civil War. And of course, when we read anything from Ethel Knight, you need to remember that this woman is the fundamental definition of a racist, the fundamental definition of somebody who supports the lost cause. And she looks at Newton Knight in the manner of him being abandoned. And it wasn't just her, and it wasn't just her in the post-war South either. Newton Knight was somebody that people just couldn't really wrap their heads around. Why would somebody abandon the cause of Confederacy? Why would they abandon their homeland to go fight in this little rebellion group down in Jones County? It didn't make sense, and a lot of Confederate veterans later on would go on to criticize him. And a lot of Union veterans actually went on to criticize him as well in the 1910s and 20s. When this actually occurred, it was an absolute shock to everybody in the state of Mississippi. And one very interesting news article from Natchez, Mississippi on July 12th, 1864, addresses this little Republic of Jones that Newton Knight kind of formed out of this, quote, band of bandits, according to Ethel. I'm going to read this excerpt out just so you can kind of comprehend that it only seems the writer's confused as of why this might be occurring. The Republic of Jones. It may be interesting if many of our citizens to know the county of Jones, in the state of Mississippi, has seceded from the state and has formed their own government, both military and civil. The Confederacy, after claiming the right of secession, not being willing to extend the same right to said republic, has declared war against it. It has now sent an army under the command of Colonel Maury of Mobile to crush this rebellion. The republic immediately prepared an acts of defense, raising an army under the command of Major Robinson, commander-in-chief of the armies of the Republic of Jones. The Brilliant Acts, the spiteful battle ensued, in which the armies of the new republic were victorious, having killed and wounded and captured many Confederates. The remainder, under the gallant commander, fled. The following is a copy of the dispatch sent from the commander-in-chief to the forces to his honor, the Secretary of War for Republic of Jones. To whom make his son, we met forces on the invading evening with 26th at the crossroads. After an engagement of 8 hours' duration, we broke his center when he fled in confusion. On the field, we captured many prisoners and several pieces of artillery. Our losses were quite slight. I have the honor to be, respectfully, Robinson, Commander-in-Chief of the Republic of Jones. After this hard-fought battle and the amnesty was null, ministries were appointed to confer with the so-called Confederate States. Propositions for peace were centered, but there has been a decline by the Confederate States. So this article really doesn't even talk about Newton Knight, but it's very interesting to point out that this little rebellion group by Newton Knight, it transformed into its own personal government. It transformed into something that wasn't Confederate, and it certainly wasn't the Union. It even had its own functioning society. It's an incredible thing to understand that this little area, this rural area of Jones, Jasper County, that area could even muster up the support to fight against the Confederacy, much less start its own government. But it did. And it did on the grounds of Newton Knight and his famed group of bandits. Following the surrender of the Confederate government in 1865, there was no longer a need for Newton Knight and the Knights Company and his band of bandits, or whatever you would want to call them. There was no place for them in a Reconstruction South, at least not in the aspect of fighting a war, a conventional war anyway. They were, however, still needed for the very important task of rebuilding the South following the destruction of the war. Newton Knight himself would be a fundamental fighter for the right of every man to vote, the right of a free and just election system in the state of Mississippi, the right for everyone, regardless of skin color. And so, by the 1870s, he would be joining an alliance with the Republican Party to help ensure that African Americans, now free, would have the opportunity to cast their vote and let their voice be heard. The natural problem with this is, out of the ashes of the devastated South rose a horrible terrorist organization, one that still threatens existence today, the Ku Klux Klan. And with the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, Newton Knight would have to take up arms, once more, to fight these terrorists. Now, Newton Knight's fight wouldn't end with the end of his life in the 1920s when he passes away, because he incorporated the fight in his kin. He incorporated the fight in his descendants. Most importantly, he taught them the values of a just and free system, a system that is completely separated from segregation, hate, or bigotry. And with this knowledge, one of his descendants, Davis Knight, would do the unthinkable. He would marry a white woman. Now, this doesn't quite add up if you're thinking right now. If you think of the traditional Newton Knight, if you've seen the pictures or you've seen him as Matthew McConaughey portrayed him in The Free State of Jones from the 2016 movie, you might know that Newton Knight is a white man for all intents and purposes. But not quite. Remember, he does have some native blood in him. And, because that little affair he had when he wasn't quite loyal to his wife, some of his descendants had a little bit of mixed blood in them. And because of that, it would be a fundamental case for the state of Mississippi. This newspaper article from the Jackson Daily News, released on the 18th of December, 1948, states the following in a bold, brash title: Jones man sentenced on a race charge. Taproot's figure emerges. Davis Knight was found guilty by the prosecution for marrying a white woman because he had, quote, an inkling of African American blood. Newton Knight, because of his existence, because of his legacy, would challenge the state of Mississippi on the principles of love, indirectly, of course. Newton Knight was certainly not alive in 1948, but his descendant would take the case to the Mississippi Supreme Court. It would be another fundamental way at chipping away at the segregation in the state of Mississippi. These small little steps would have a much bigger impact by the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s. And, indirectly, would change the way people perceive love, perceive each other, and perceive the idea of race. I was no unionist. This is one of the last quotes we have recorded from Newton Knight before his passing in 1922. This quote, taken in 1921, summarizes what Newton Knight was. He wasn't a Unionist. He wasn't a Confederate either. He was simply a man living in Jones County. Newton Knight, at the end of the day, was simply somebody who changed Mississippi for the better. And it is important to remember that. That he wasn't a Unionist, that he wasn't Confederate, but that he was an American. And that he and his descendants would help change America for the better. Thank you for taking the time today to listen to the life and legacy of Newton Knight and how he has impacted Mississippi more than he could have ever imagined. And thank you, most importantly, for sticking with the podcast, even during the times that some of the language from Ethel Knight, the newspapers, and articles and memoirs was a little sketchy. Some of the spelling and errors seemed quite prevalent. But most importantly, thank you for wanting to learn about how somebody's life impacted where we are today.